Good afternoon to you, Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for the 27th of July, 2017. Happy Thursday to you. Hey, do you remember the talk of El Niño a few months ago? Well, that is all but gone. Look at these SOI numbers, positive. Even the 90-day is up significantly from where the 30 days of June had us at -9. Now we are only at -1, and we will end the month in positive territory for the 30-day here. And so that's the end of that. In fact, it won't be long that I will absolutely quit talking about it for the rest of the year until December, when we start looking ahead to what might happen with it next year. That being said, let's take a look at this real quick, the subsurface chart. Have not visited this in a while. This was updated recently here. That is too much of a thin line. Let's make it a little thicker there, shall we? So this is what it looks like in the subsurface. A small area of subsurface heat content above the long-term average, but this is fairly small and insignificant. Overall, the background state here of the ENSO, or what we call the El Niño Southern Oscillation phenomenon, is one that is neutral to just slightly warmer than neutral, but clearly no El Niño signal from this of any real measure at all. The subsurface waters just aren't allowing it. The trade winds aren't allowing it. In fact, they are stronger than normal for the most part. Remember, this is the surface up here at the top of this particular graphic, and the trades are blowing pretty strong from the east to the west here. The east is over here on the right-hand side, and the western part of the Pacific is on the left-hand side, and everything is flowing generally the way it should across this region, keeping everything mixed up and not allowing any El Niños to develop. So there you go. In the Atlantic Basin, there's one little area to monitor south and west of the Cape Verde Islands. 30% chance of development down in the deep tropics over the next 5 days. But the computer models really aren't that bullish on development with this system. A very strong area of high pressure still persists over the Atlantic here, and I'm just kind of generalizing this. It's not only at the surface, but it's at several layers of the atmosphere all the way up to the 500 millibar level. And in fact, some of the analysis coming up on the GFS indicate that this will reach a 600 decameter ridge height, and that's just a meteorological way of saying that is a big mountain of air sitting over the Atlantic, which the pressure gradient and the way that the pressure patterns work will really increase the trades down here and probably keep things unfavorable. So we can just kind of put a yellow X through here and over here over the next week to 10 days or so. Maybe some weak development out here in the main development region itself, but because of this very strong high that's going to be dominant, nothing's really going to have a chance to survive very long because it's still just a little too early. We talk about the watched pot never boils. Well, the stove has been on for quite some time, and the water has got those little, steam tendrils coming up off the top, and maybe a few bubbles rising here and there to, further the analogy here, but it's not ready to boil just yet. And so, it's late July, as I've said before. For me, over the 20-something years that I've been doing this professionally, and certainly many years before that, watching it growing up as a child and then as a teenager and then as a college student, it's not until after August the 15th that normally things ramp up anyway, with the natural background state transitioning to a period of more favorable activity overall. We call that climatology. In the eastern Pacific, things are still very active here for the most part. Notice that we have not had any development down in this area threatening to come up and impact Mexico. So the resort areas, Manzanillo, Acapulco, and then even up to Cabo San Lucas here, have not had any issues this year other than maybe some increased surf and swells from some of these systems. But fortunately, no impacts. Now that can change later on as we change the pattern over North America and the Northern Hemisphere as a whole. That usually doesn't kick in until later in August and through September especially, and into October, where you get these systems that will develop, and then you get troughing up here that erodes the ridges down, and then they try to turn up towards the Baja, bringing moisture to the southwest, and a bunch of other problems as well. And just to give you an idea here, let's just click on Hurricane Hillary. Again, no real threat for this to turn north up towards Southern California like some of the runs were showing with the GFS. That Fujiwara effect, the interaction between this hurricane, Hillary here, and Irwin, how they both, kind of trying to circulate around a common center here, really not that pronounced and not going to be an issue for any major impacts to Southern California, which I guess that's good. You'd use the rain, but sometimes that can be a little excessive, obviously, with some of these systems. So it's best to avoid it, I suppose. And you had a pretty good rainy season this past winter, so there you go. So looking at this, I really like this site, by the way. It's the Tropical Cyclone Guidance Project from NCAR, and you see the URL there, and you can just type in, what do I do for Google search? I think I type RAL tropical, 2 different words there, if I try to look it up on Google, and this is what you get. And clearly you can see that the Pacific right now is dominating the scene with several systems, a couple of typhoons, well, 1 typhoon, 1 hurricane, 1 tropical storm in the West Pac, it's like it's balanced. It's it's fair and balanced. That's all I'm going to say. You have stuff on the right and stuff on the left, but that's all. I'm not even going to go there. Nevertheless, you have these systems out here. The only one that's really going to impact land is right here, and this would be Tropical Storm Nisat, or Nasat, however you say it. And I want to show you a satellite picture of it. You don't usually see shear coming out of the north impacting these systems in the vicinity, coming out of the Philippine Sea towards Taiwan. And if you know Josh Morgerman, the iCyclone, hurricane, typhoon, and cyclone chaser, he's got quite a portfolio. If you've never heard of him, check him out sometime, and he'll tell you that it's pretty rare to see such a damaged system, so to speak. And you can clearly see the low-level circulation, coming in with these feeder bands trying, but it's almost exposed with the center because of northerly shear. And the bottom line is you usually don't see the West Pac suffering, so to speak, from this kind of malevolency in the way these things develop. Normally you get these powerful typhoons coming up and they hit Taiwan. Sometimes they come straight in from the east. They can split the difference and head towards mainland China. And we know about the horrors of some of these typhoons that can go through the Philippines as well. So it's pretty rare to see such disheveledness with these systems. And in fact, this is forecast to head towards Taiwan. And if we look at the tracks and the information here from the Joint Typhoon Warning Service, the peak here is 80 knots, so only about 90 miles per hour with gusts to over 100 knots. And that's it. We're not seeing any of these 130, 140, 150 knots like we've seen in years past. So it just makes me wonder, man, if the Pacific overall is lagging, then is the energy going to concentrate itself in the Atlantic basin, or does it just not work that way? Because you've seen this over the last few years, really all the way back to 2013 with Super Typhoon Haiyan that went through there, and how just unbelievable that was. And last year was very busy. Josh Morgan was in Taiwan for a July typhoon, Nipper Pack, or however you say it, I can't remember. And my apologies that I don't know the names, maybe like I should. Nippertack or whatever it was. Very, very strong last year. He said one of the strongest he's ever really been in because it stayed intact as it came in. But I digress. We'll get back to the story at hand. A weakening typhoon headed for Taiwan and then mainland China over here. Impacts, yes, but believe me, over in Taiwan, they are definitely built for it. Doesn't make it any less of a nuisance, but at least it's not a devastating hit to a developing part of the world. I think Taiwan is definitely anything but developing. They're pretty advanced there, so they can handle it. In the Atlantic basin, like I said, still very high pressure overall. I say very, that's a little embellished. I mean, it's normal for this time of year, and you can even see the dry air with the stratocumulus clouds here, and so our tropical waves are still kind of squashed. This is energy that's trying to gather. This is what the Hurricane Center has outlooked. And the European model is trying to develop this. It's triggering some of these automatic algorithms. Dr. Michael Ventris with WSI Corp, showing his calibrated ECMWF, probability charts, and it's pretty high through this region over the next few days. So we'll see. Maybe the pattern is going to change a little faster than normal compared to climatology, not waiting until mid-August, but I think it's still going to be a little bit of time before we get these systems to really take advantage of the background state, the very warm water compared to normal that has been laid before them. It's just not ready yet. And that too, relates to the Saharan air layer. This is a pretty decent outbreak coming out now off of Africa. Weaker out here and a little bit of a dent in it right there. But overall, still just not where we need to be yet in terms of development. And I say that, on the obvious level, that's very positive for people who want no interaction whatsoever with tropical cyclones. But then I say, hey, it's positive too, because if they come, this again is your time to prepare. You got all this ample time when nothing is out there, nothing is in the headlines, to make some preparedness choices now that can help you later. And again, this is an interesting product. This is the convectively coupled Kelvin wave, and I'm going to try to explain this to the best of my ability. Let's draw with yellow. You know what? I'm going to change this to red. That'll be easier. So here is the southeast United States right here. All right, Central America and South America. And we'll do the west coast as well, Pacific side. So you get your idea. There's Africa over here to the east side. And this is what it looks like today. All right, and so the Atlantic, this yellow subsidence, sinking air, no convective activity to speak of. And we saw that in the satellite picture. As we go out into time through week 1, a week out in time, that begins to change. The blue areas here indicating more rising motion in the atmosphere, and the more of these contour lines you see, it's just like a topographic map would be. The closer the lines are together, the steeper the gradient, and in this case, the higher the amplitude, if you will, of the wave of energy or convection that's moving through. In fact, statistics tells us, if you remember statistics, it is 3, and in some cases more than 3, sigma above the long-term average. And to put it in very simple terms, it's 3 times the mean or the average. And it's increasing with each time this gets run. Remember, these are farther out in time, a week out and then 2 weeks out, and it leaves behind a much more favorable, look at that, no yellows at all. Most of the Atlantic basin showing up in blue, and this will come into more focus as we get closer to this actually happening. You understand that? The resolution will get better, and it'll start to hone in, and as Pacific activity dies down, especially in the East Pac, this is expected to ramp up. Now let me put this into terms so that we can possibly put an end, even though it's only 1 out of 100, so to speak, of any negative comments about hyping or, trying to figure out something weeks in advance that it's BS. Let me put this into terms that everybody can understand. You're in a football game, my sports analogy is here, and it doesn't even matter. It doesn't have to be like the end of the game or the Super Bowl or anything like that. It's just a field goal kicker is at the 30-yard line to make a field goal to score 3 points. He's a very good kicker, very good track record, and pretty much everybody expects that he will make that field goal. Well, just because he should doesn't mean that he will. The same thing in basketball, okay? You think about some of these incredible basketball players, especially free throw shooters, college basketball, in NBA, doesn't matter, three-point shooters, Steph Curry, he's good at that three-point shot. And so he launches one, and it should go in, but it doesn't mean that it has to go in. Do you understand that? And it is that simple. Most of the time, those shots are going to fall. Most of the time, the field goal kicker is going to make that easy 30-yard, even closer than that sometimes, right? 20-yard where you say, man, that's a gimme. That's 3 points on the board right there for whoever against whoever, or Steph Curry makes that three-pointer. Whatever, right? But it doesn't mean that it's 100% ever. Nobody's 100%. Unless you don't try, and then you're 100% not doing anything. So in this case, we see this, and it's a signal, all right? This is a signal. This is the ball placed on the tee for the field goal kicker to put it through the uprights. Now we have to see if the kick is good or if the kick is errant and bad. And we won't know. We simply won't know until it's upon us. But we do have these incredible tools now that show us a glimpse into the future, and so it's showing us a favorable pattern, and so we have to start paying attention. That's all it means. It doesn't mean to worry or to get upset or anything. It's just, hey, it might happen, so let's be ready for it if it does, and be thankful that we live in an age where we do have this technology available. Looking at the Madden-Julian oscillation, now this is different than a convectively coupled Kelvin wave. The Madden-Julian oscillation is more of a broader, larger scale pattern of upward motion in the atmosphere, down in the tropics especially. And for the most part, the GFS and the Euro generally agree, at least on the shape. You see that? They're not wildly different for once, and so that's good to see. And this really isn't a lot of help because we're not seeing necessarily either of them swinging out wildly over here into phases 8 and 1. So the Madden-Julian oscillation activity itself not going to be very pronounced, and instead I think we're going to have to just watch what happens with this sort of setting the pattern up down the road, that the Atlantic and maybe the Western Pacific become very busy into August and through the rest of the hurricane season, with periods of development followed by periods of quiet and then another period of development. And even in the extreme season of 2005, we saw that. We saw periods of development, but everything was so much more favorable then that, some of those, had Hurricane Dennis that was darn near a Cat 5. What was it that hit the Yucatan? It wasn't Emily. Was it Emily? Oh, man, this is bad that I can't remember. The E-storm that year, was a Category 5, the earliest, I think, on record in July. And so this year is different. It's a little bit more subdued, thank goodness. And so we're not getting that kind of development in terms of intensity. But these patterns, these ups and downs, we have seen regularly. And when that happens in the natural occurrence of the background state becoming more conducive automatically, then the systems will hold on and they will become stronger, and we could have impacts. And we're not talking about just the United States here. We have all these areas of the Atlantic Basin that we need to concentrate on, from the Canadian Maritimes to the Yucatan to Trinidad and Tobago and everything in between. This isn't just a U.S. problem, all right? So keep that in mind too. That's it from me for today. Really, we covered it all. No reason to make up something that isn't there. Again, use this time to do something. Think about it, prepare, buy extra water, get those batteries now, check your flashlights, check your generator. If you haven't used your generator in forever, my goodness, you don't want that to not work for you. What a nightmare and a stress-causing issue that could be. This is the time to use to get that stuff done ahead of time. Have a great rest of your Thursday as always. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I'm Mark Settle for HurricaneTrack.com, and we'll talk again tomorrow.